Welcome to the podcast where together, every Monday, we explore hospitality in its very broadest sense. From culture and cooking, cocktails and coffee, nutrition and farming, politics and animal welfare, organic and sustainability, family and business, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. Come and learn with me, Mark Cribb, about where our food and our drink comes from, and the businesses and, more importantly, the human beings that thrive on where we decide to spend our time and our money. Sign up to our weekly newsletter at humansofhospitality.co.uk and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. Hi, thank you for joining me. It is Sunday the 18th of October as I record this intro. Half term is a week away and the hospitality industry limps towards it, depending on what tier you are in and where you are in the country. And I appreciate people listen to this podcast all over the world, which is lovely, but it's clearly very UK centric. Probably a little too much south of England centric, to be fair. Sorry about that. It just happens to be my geographical location, and current travel restrictions make my brain ache. But here we are, where if you're in Northern Ireland, pubs and restaurants are closed completely. In Scotland, they can only open indoors until 6 p.m. with no alcohol sales, and outdoors until 10 p.m. with alcohol sales. In Wales, you can only go out with your own household, and in England, it depends what tier you're in. From pubs and bars closed completely to restaurants open until 10 p.m. if serving a substantial meal. Fundamentally, it is a mess, and so much of it seems so unnecessary. Thousands of redundancies have been announced in the past week across the sector. It's just been heartbreaking. But I am a deluded optimist, and whilst I may be angrier than I've ever been with the government for some of the ridiculousness of their decisions, I still would not want to be the person calling the shots and managing the complexity of this mess. But as a deluded optimist, I'm still excited for the future of hospitality. I know it's full of resilient, creative obsessives. I'm just bloody annoyed that so much of the hardship they are being put through is so unnecessary. But this is not the podcast for us to dive too deeply down this hole, or at least not this week. Instead, I'm keeping myself reasonably sane by continuing to meet the exceptional humans who make this such a diverse and exciting sector, despite the government's lack of respect for it. And this week, we are off to chat with Ollie Hutson, head kitchen and gardener of the Pig Hotels and Restaurant. And regular listeners will know I'm a big fan of the Pig and very much enjoyed interviewing Robin Hutson, founder of the Pig and Hotel de Van, for my 100th episode. In that conversation, Robin mentioned his son Ollie had a monster spreadsheet in his role, ensuring so much produce for the Pig could come from the kitchen gardens. And right there and then, a seed was sown. Sorry, that was terrible, wasn't it? Anyway, excluding the puns, it sounded to me like Ollie was one of those typical humans of hospitality that very few people ever really appreciate. The depth of roles all loosely hung under this word hospitality is what excites me every single day. So much goes on behind the scenes, and those 1 million tiny details that ensure guests have a great experience. And it does not matter if it's the person sifting through your coffee beans by hand, drying them out in the sun in far-off lands, or the barista extracting the maximum flavour on the coffee machine in front of you. So needless to say, I was excited to arrange to go to the Pig nursery in the New Forest and meet Ollie face to face and get to peruse this mother of seed planning spreadsheets. Now I have to admit to going down a couple of rabbit holes in here where I do get to ask Ollie for some tips on my personal Brassica growing challenges, and there are a few points where it might sound like you've transcended to Gardener's Question Time on a long lost Radio 4 broadcast. Sorry, that is my fault. But equally, you are going to learn just how much work goes into creating a kitchen garden for a hotel. The balance between productive space and a show garden space. How to ensure these spaces always look great but are genuinely used for a seed to plate menu. I love Ollie's annual planning meeting with the chefs, where they are only allowed to say 4 things: more, less, the same, or not at all. I think many more meetings should be restricted to just those 4 options. We also touch on Ollie's childhood and the pros and cons of living in an entrepreneurial house, and his first-hand witnessing of Hotel de Van being built around family life. Ollie was generous with his time and an utter gentleman to spend a couple of hours with. I hope you enjoy the results, and next time you wander through a kitchen garden, appreciate just how much graft is going on behind the scenes. And remember, to keep this weekly podcast on the air takes quite a bit of time and cash and travelling around the country and paying for hosting and editing and the website and all that jazz. So if you can help support it, it would be appreciated. If you have got some spare cash, that can be done by heading to the website humansofhospitality.co.uk and clicking on either the PayPal button for a one-off contribution or the Patreon button to set up some monthly support. And if money is a bit tight, the other way you can show your support is by picking up the device you are probably listening on, scrolling down to the review section and hitting 5 stars and subscribe. And if possible, leave just a few words. Just that simple task means that I know you're listening, but more importantly helps me sell the podcast when I get in touch with potential future guests. And that means there's more chance they will say yes, and more chance that you will get to enjoy any insights they may have. Right, enough of me, let's catch up with Ollie. Cheers. Ollie Hutson, Group Head Kitchen Gardener for the Pig. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Hugely appreciated. Can you just explain, people probably listening can hear some funny noises in the background. Can you just explain where we are in the world, please, Ollie?
Hi, Mark. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on today. It's a pleasure. We are in our nursery at head office in Lyndhurst in the New Forest. So we basically do all of our propagation for all of the kitchen gardens across the group in this massive great polytunnel we've got here. It's 100 by 30 foot, double skinned jobby, fully heated and lighted, and we ship our seedlings out from there.
Amazing. So we literally are sat in the middle of a polytunnel. I think the forecast is for heavy rain. At the minute it's all right, isn't it? But if all of a sudden it sounds like, I don't know, we've been joined by 1,000 drummers, it's just because it's absolutely lashing it down, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes it can sound like you're in a turbine of a jet or something in here.
Yeah, and it looks a bit like that with a fan sort of in the backdrop. So thanks for opening the space. You've just given me a tour, which is awesome. So I've been to the Pig numerous times, stayed once, but been for lunch, and I've interviewed James and I've interviewed your dad and had some fascinating conversations. And it always blows me away when I go to the Pig that the gardens are incredible. You are the reason that my family took the piss out of me throughout lockdown, because I basically developed my own spreadsheet and built my own kitchen garden, and it was as a result partly of interviewing James over at the Pig on the Beach, and your gardens look incredible. So I wanted to come and find out what actually happens behind the scenes, basically. So really looking forward to us having a chat. Can you just give a sense of scale then? I think I said when we met earlier, I saw a picture earlier, 33,000 seedlings or something. How many people are employed in the kitchen gardens? How much stuff are you producing? Just give us a sense of what goes on to create those amazing spaces.
Okay, so obviously we've got sort of 6 hotels in the group. Each of those hotels has 3 kitchen gardeners running their kitchen garden. That would be a head kitchen gardener and two general kitchen gardeners. And then we have a team of 3.5 at the head office nursery who as I said then, we grow produce the seedlings for the hotels from.
Amazing. Okay, so it's a big amount of work, isn't it? For you can buy a beetroot, for not a huge amount of cash in the local supermarket, haven't you? You've been doing this. How long have you been in this role, and how long have you been, has there been, I suppose, this level of complexity behind the scenes?
So I started with the Pig before we opened the first Pig. So February the 1st, 2011 was my first day.
Right.
I just started off as a general kitchen gardener, dog's body, and slowly worked myself up to managing the Pig in Brockenhurst's garden. And then from there, after doing that for a few years, I went and worked on the restoration of the Pig near Bath's kitchen garden. Again, managing that for a couple of years before I was given a sort of group role to oversee all of the kitchen gardens, and there's not a huge amount of managing involved. It's more just kind of keeping them all pointing in the right direction and on brand, as it were.
Okay, so we'll come into a little bit of the detail, but then just from a planning process then, and I suppose there was a little trigger when I interviewed Robin, your dad, a few weeks ago, and I can't remember what exactly we were chatting about, but he mentioned this spreadsheet, I suppose this mother of all spreadsheets that was required, and your name came up, and I thought, I need to go and see that spreadsheet. You've very kindly just shown it to me. So can you just chat a little bit, I suppose, about that journey of planning that goes on for, when do you start? What are we now? We're nearly in October, I suppose. Maybe that's a good place to start to explain what you're sort of doing now and that level of complexity to get into next year and what will fundamentally be on people's plates potentially next spring.
Cool. So it's a real nerdy deep dive.
Yeah, it is. We're straight into the deep stuff.
Going into the spreadsheets and everything. But I suppose the process we will go through on an annual basis to produce the gardens that you see, and I'll take this year as an example. So it's now September 2020, as you said. So as we speak, our head kitchen gardeners will be meeting with their head chefs, their respective head chefs, and they'll basically have a list of everything that was grown in the kitchen garden that year. And the head chef has a choice of things to say. They can say more, less, the same, or not at all.
Okay.
I mean,
just four options.
You've dealt with chefs enough. You don't want to give them too many options. You'll be there for a week, and they don't have that time. So
give me the four again. More,
less, the same, or not at all.
I love that. I would love that if I could have meetings with my chefs and they were the only four things they were allowed to say. Money, more, less, the same, not at all.
It really is that simple at that stage.
Okay.
So it starts off really basic. From there, our head kitchen gardeners take that information and form a spreadsheet which they will have every bed in the garden mapped out, and the horizontal lines on that spreadsheet will be every week in the year. And you will basically kind of drag and drop. Let's take a beetroot, for example, and that might be in the ground for 10 weeks or so. So there's a 10-week block in the middle there. That's bed A6. That's going to be beetroot, and then afterwards, it might be another crop of beetroot, or it might be some winter brassicas maybe going in there. So from that information, they've produced this great big spreadsheet of every bed. We then meet as a group of head kitchen gardeners. This year that will probably be on Zoom, I'm sure. No. And we create a massive spreadsheet that you just saw, which we go through every crop and variety, the sowing date, the projected delivery date, the number of sort of trays of seedlings that we need to produce per hotel, and the number of seeds per block. And it's so, as I say, it's nerdy. It's I know every one of our trays holds 168 seedlings, or if I use potted herbs, I know that I'll get 12 types of one pot or 7 types of another pot in those trays. It's and
how much of that sort of, because maybe it's only because I was drinking a coffee this morning before I came out to see you, just running through the questions, looking out at my garden, which looked lovely maybe 3 months ago, but already, overgrown, loads of lovely kale that's just been completely decimated and completely eaten. Just a little bit depressing, really, from what I hoped it would be in my head, and then the reality and the complexity. So how much of that knowledge has just sort of evolved, I suppose, over time, and that you now just know it? Because you make it sound really simple. You're like, okay, they want a bit more beetroot, so we just we chuck the date and it will be delivered and the date it will be sown. But weather affects that. I don't know, just all sorts of things. Is this just something you've just basically got the hang of over a period of time, or are you looking on the back of the seeds and going, right, what date does it say, and then kind of calculating it, or have you just got a feel for it now, I suppose?
All of the above.
Really?
A little bit. So, it's funny you mentioned the seed packets. So generally, the seed companies play it safe. So if you've got a packet of beetroot seed and it says, sow between April and June or something like that, you can normally, increase that window, by a month or two in either direction on most seed packets. You just probably won't get the same sort of percentage of germination, and that's what the seed companies care about. Joe Blogg Seed Company don't want you to leave a review going only 50% of them germinated because you tried to sow that packet of beetroot in mid-August when when it was too hot for them to germinate, or beetroot germinate anyway. It's a bad example, but
don't worry, nobody was doubting you, Ollie. They just presume you're right.
But I suppose I grew up in a New Forest. I used to help my granddad on his allotment, as a child a little bit. So was working with vegetables to some extent from a young age there. My dad had a little herb garden at home for culinary herbs. I fast forward a few years, I went to agricultural college, Sparsholt College near Winchester. I did a national diploma in countryside management, which is relevant but not exactly what I'm doing now, but a lot of the knowledge is transferable. And really I sort of fell into the job really, and the opportunity came along to train and increase my knowledge a little bit. A lot of my own time, reading books, and there's a couple of sort of kitchen garden writers and journalists who really sort of fascinate me, and they're kind of heroes of mine. So I get all their books and they come out. But I think you get out of get whatever you want out of things depending on what you put in, don't you? So that independent research was probably what led me to learn a lot more about manipulating seasons and varieties.
Okay, because it's quite an unusual thing to get interested in at a young age, as my kids keep reminding me that apparently I'm too young, which is very kind of them to be out potting about in my garden. I did wonder, I suppose, because I kind of imagine your childhood would have been, would that have been Hotel de Van times? I'm trying to think that your dad didn't basically strike me as the sort of person who would have had a lot of time to be potting around in the garden growing veggies, because he was growing a hotel empire. So I wondered where that inspiration came from. So it was more from Grandad than Robin, was it? Yeah,
well, I suppose his were sort of perennial herb beds, so thymes and mints, and not things that you'd have to re-sow every year and keep having to dig over the beds. It was more, obviously he's a foodie, so more sort of little things that he could use in the kitchen to add a bit of oomph to his dishes. But that stage of my childhood, so he was at Chewton Glen for my sort of first decade or so, give or take, and it was about a week or so before my 9th birthday that the first Hotel de Van opened, and obviously they had that for 13 years or so, I think. 12, 13 years or so. So that sort of took up a lot of my adolescence, really, and my teenage years, being there.
Yeah. Was that fun? Did you get to sort of witness? I kind of always think, I suppose, kids who've got parents who do a normal 9-to-5 job. I remember being out on a bike ride with my kids a few years ago now, and I was in, I'm going to use the word argument, a debate, let's see, but planning, basically. I was having a debate with the EHO and planning around some extraction system that I needed in my kitchen, and I was driving around the forest trying to find a point, like a high point where I could get a signal on my phone, and it must have been the weekend, or I'd taken an alleged day off, and I was having these debates down the phone, and I remember my kids later saying to me, Daddy, why are the council so stupid? And I was like, they're not necessarily stupid. You might have, heard me being a little bit cross, but I thought, fascinating that what they got to witness, I suppose, about work-life balance and the ethics of work and stuff, in the fact that even riding around the forest, you're still committed to work. Presumably, same for you. You were exposed to what was a 24/7 kind of roller coaster of seeing a business develop. How did that feel as a kid? Do you remember that being exciting, interesting, a pain? Cancelled birthdays, or actually was it awesome because you got to go and eat great food in great hotels?
Well, I suppose, you get used to not seeing your dad on Christmas so much every year, but he would definitely make the effort, and go into the hotels in the mornings and then have the afternoons with the family. So I think he was probably very conscious of providing that balance for the family. I loved, and I still do, I love being on the building sites, in the hotel build. I love seeing the projects come together. I'm probably a project-focused worker. I like working to deadlines, and the kind of challenge Annika of it all. It's quite a dated reference.
Don't worry, it works for me. Yeah, perfect.
I don't quite know what your demographic is.
No, I remember Challenge Annika well. Yes, I do. People listening, who knows? Who cares? As long as we're having a good time, Ollie.
So I still do. As we speak, in fact, tomorrow is the big day. We kind of start our project for building the beds at our new property down in Madehurst in the South Downs. So,
wow.
All the timber was delivered yesterday. So I'm going to be down there with a chop saw and a drill. Amazing. Tomorrow, getting my fingernails dirty.
That is exciting.
So
how far out? When does that open?
Summer next year, but okay. It's it's difficult to plan too far ahead in 2020.
Particularly with lockdown. I'm going to come back to that because I want to talk about how far out you sort of plan stuff. So we'll touch on that again. But just when you went to agricultural college, then did you have a plan at that point as to what you were going to do? You didn't go there for this job, presumably. What do you think you would have done if this hadn't come along, or did you have this in mind working in the family business?
No, I suppose when I went to agricultural college, I was probably more thinking of ecology and conservation as a career path, and I spent a little bit of time after college, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years or so, I'd say, kind of doing little bits of tree surgery or woodland management, little bits of river management. I was a marine warden for a season at Kimmeridge Bay and Purbeck, which was a fascinating role. So yeah, I saw a lot of different things, and this makes me sound very lazy, but partly it's quite a difficult world to break into, the ecology and conservation world, and I became a little bit disillusioned with it as well, because I sort of found that, all the people with the real knowledge and the degrees and the real skills, they were just in the office, whereas all the physical sort of the actual work on the ground was being done by volunteers, and managed by rangers, but quite a low ratio, quite high ratio of volunteers to rangers there, really.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's sad, really, isn't it, that's what ends up happening. Or same in hospitality in general, I think, isn't it? You start on the floor behind the bar, you're a barista or whatever, and probably love customer service, and then a few years later you find you're in the basement in a cupboard that the hotel calls an office, processing spreadsheets. Even you've got a spreadsheet, Ollie. Come on.
I shouldn't sound too cynical on the whole ecology and conservation industry, because I do. It does have a big place in my heart, and I do think it's incredibly important.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to touch on that in a little bit with sort of modern farming and soil in a minute. So. Then now, when you started, a couple of hotels. Now you've just opened one down in Cornwall, another one opening next year. When you get a new property, do you kind of have a template now? You kind of know what a pig kitchen garden looks like, or is each one very bespoke and very much designed around, I don't know, the nuances of a new property, I suppose?
You work with the space available, really. So I think you could categorise a kitchen garden build project in two ways. So it's either a complete new build, where you've got a blank canvas and carte blanche to do what you want, or you've got a restoration job, where my personal kind of ethos is I like to try and do justice to the kitchen gardener or the gardeners who were there before. So work with what they've provided. Try and not just dig it all up and start again. Try and sort of stick with the original plans. As I see it, you're just a custodian for a while of that garden. You are the head gardener at that time. You're the top dog at that time. But your tenure is short in the grand scheme of things.
Nature and trees kind of infinite. Well, hopefully, isn't it? I'm sure the planet will die eventually, but with a bit of luck, we'll be off it by then.
But there'll be certain things I'll be looking for as well. The formula of where to site the greenhouse, or the spacing of our beds and pathways. We like to, in the relatively small spaces we have available, we like to maximise production. So it wouldn't make sense to have a great big 2.5-3 metre wide path in the centre of the garden, when that could be, basically 1.5 metres, 1.2 metres, just wide enough to get a guest and or a wheelbarrow down, and be able to pass each other, and don't jeopardise the growing space.
Right. And do you always have a walled garden, or do some of them have, some of them don't?
Not all of them have walls.
Mm-hmm.
We're very lucky in a number of our properties that they have sort of pre-existing walled gardens that we've been able to. Okay.
So you don't build them.
In.
If they're there, you utilise them. But
exactly,
because I'm thinking like the pig on the beach is walled garden is just beautiful aesthetically. Absolutely stunning. And if there was a Disney walled garden that had been manicured and designed, it would be that. It's just absolutely stunning. But fundamentally, it was there. You just used the space. Yeah?
Not all the walls were original, actually.
Right.
Here
we go. Here's the dirt.
I think we built 2 of the walls, so
Okay.
we completed the square.
Yeah. How many walls are there? No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, the Pig on the Beach garden is a really lovely garden. There's one major thing if I had my time again, I would change about that.
Yeah.
And that would be I would put the greenhouse on the opposite wall so that you'd walk into the garden through the greenhouse.
Okay.
If money was no...
Why?
I think it'd be a really nice experience to sort of bring you into the garden. I'm thinking about the kind of guest experience there. Whilst we're farmers of sorts, and a huge part of what we do is production gardening, we can never lose sight of the fact that we're a show garden as well.
You are.
And we, I don't know, at a busy Sunday lunch, we might have 100 guests come through the garden after lunch.
Okay.
And
so you encourage people to actually go out and see the produce and explore those, and do you?
Oh, absolutely. It's great. When people have just finished their I don't know, buttered baby leek side, and they come out to the garden and they can literally see the bed that those baby leeks were harvested from that morning. The way I harvest in quite a brutal way, and I get the guys to harvest in quite a brutal way, so it makes it very visual that you can see what is being harvested at any one time. And we always start our harvesting from the main pathways where the guests are most likely to be walking down.
Really?
I mean, some places might want to have it looking pristine and hide the gaps in the crop where they've been harvested, but I make a big point of showing off that, I suppose.
When you say harvest in a brutal way, I'm imagining you out there with a machete kind of screaming, but you just mean literally where you harvest from, basically.
Where you harvest from. So you sort of go back in a sort of wave, and if it's a crop you describe as a cut and come again crop, like a rocket or a chard, where you literally just snip the top off the plant and it will grow back again, you'll end up with a succession of mature plants, freshly cut, sort of a brutal line where it's freshly cut, and then slowly, as you sort of go back to the beginning of the bed, you'll see sort of newer leaves forming, ready to be harvested when, in theory, if you've timed it right, when you finish the other end of the bed.
And are you pretty quick then at having, and that's sort of the idea of this place, I suppose, is your centralised kind of hub where you send stuff out from? Are you pretty good at having replacement kind of stock to go straight in as soon as something's been harvested and it's out, you're in, and because you're not growing it in the bed from seed, presumably you're getting it to a point here where aesthetically it already looks good, you've got a bit of a head start. Is that what you try and have ready to go straight in, basically?
Exactly, yeah. We don't really want to be shipping things out that's going to have to hang around at the hotel, making the place look untidy for too long before going in the ground. So in theory, we should have it perfectly timed so they're ready to go in on that day. But it's all about planning, communication, really, and just constantly communicating to each other.
My really dishevelled, shit-looking garden is pretty much on the way from here to the Pig on the Beach, Ollie. So I'm just thinking, next time you go past with your perfectly manicured produce, if you could just come down my road and lob a few over the fence.
If it's going to fall off the back of the van.
Yeah. That would be amazing, because certainly every time I've been, they look stunning. I was lucky, James Golding, your exec chef, showed me around Pig on the Beach. That's just where I interviewed him, and showed me around those gardens, and it just blew my mind that it all looks so perfect. Has the amount of time, so you touched on just then your new one opening next summer and you're in there tomorrow, has the amount of time that you've now got to kind of develop those gardens, has that changed as you've gone on? Because I kind of imagine normally in hospitality these things are like winging it at the last minute. In the early days, was it kind of like, right, you've got 10 days and now you've got 10 months? Has that changed? And is there a recognition of just how much work goes into producing a kitchen garden, I suppose?
So I reckon the work that goes into building one of our gardens is roughly about 9 months for 2 people to create one of our gardens from scratch. And obviously, if you might get an extra person in halfway through there, to run up to the opening. We're quite lucky with our kitchen gardens because they're generally aside from the hotels. They're not like right butting up against the walls. You can kind of kick the builders out quite early. And you're not fighting for competing for the space. Whereas with our formal beds, which will be butting up against the walls, right up to the week of opening, you're likely to have decorators' scaffolds there, or electricians or plumbers needing access to to little bits outside the garden. So we going back to that 90s reference to the Challenge Annika, that's where you really feel that, planting out those formal beds in the last week or so before the opening.
Yeah.
But again, maybe we have separate teams for the grounds as we do for the kitchen gardens. So maybe earlier in the project, the grounds teams, who are normally responsible for the formal gardens and the animal keeping, animal husbandry, I should say, they will help us a bit in the kitchen garden, and then in the really sort of scary bit just before the opening, that's when all hands on deck on those formal beds.
Yeah, it's a buzz though, isn't it? It's exciting. It's always chaos the last 72 hours, 3 weeks, whatever. Yeah, exactly. That's the buzz. So Harlyn Bay is where you most recently opened. I've not been there yet, but seeing some amazing feedback. When you think about what that now looks like compared to when it was just sort of an idea, presumably in your head when you first got the property, has it pretty much come out as you expected? Do you kind of visualize these things, I suppose, or were there some big changes? Because when you renovate a building, all too often you go, oh, shit, I didn't know there was a wall there, or that was impossible to move, or whatever. Or is it do you have a bit more freedom in a garden to go, yeah, I wanted that and that's what I got, or does it evolve?
Yeah, I think so. I suppose in the grand scheme of things, our costs are not that high compared to some of the costs in the rest of the build. Like, I mean, the difference in the cost of building a kitchen garden or a kitchen would be significant. So it does allow us a bit more freedom to play with things, and you don't get sort of someone looking over your shoulder with your expenses, to quite the same extent. So I can normally go into a place and visualize what I want, and it will end up looking something like my original plans, which, I mean, they will either be done like on a bit of muddy, screwed up paper in Sharpie, or if I really want to push the boat out, I'll do them on Microsoft Paint and send them to the architects, which normally gets a bit of a laugh at my expense. Elements of the gardens tend to be slotted in at the last minute, so we sort of finish the jigsaw with a few bits that we know we want them in there, but as we get a feel for the space when we actually start working in it, we then make those decisions a bit later and in the process. Examples of that at Harlyn Bay would be the mushroom house that we stuck in there, and probably some of the perennial vegetable beds. We found a nice place for them kind of last minute.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just imagining a mushroom house in the 90s would have been a very different experience probably to the sort of mushroom house now, but let's not go there. Soil, right? Hugely important, isn't it? Nothing works without soil. Without soil, fundamentally the entire planet's screwed. Do you end up shipping in loads of manure and bringing in stuff fresh? Do you just go in and dig it up? I'm kind of thinking that it must be fundamental to the ultimate success. How do you get that right?
I suppose every site is different because you're working with a different environment in every area. I mean, the ground in Harlyn in Cornwall is very different from the ground in Kent, near Canterbury. Where in Kent you have great lumps of flint and chalk, in Cornwall you have big lumps of clay and slate. So yeah, to a certain extent it depends on the actual property. We compost all of our garden waste. However, because we put chicken manure in our compost, and this is funny you mentioned the EHO earlier, we basically got a bit of a talking to by the EHO a few years ago when we wanted to use it for growing vegetables. They said you're not allowed to do that if you're putting chicken manure on the compost heap as well. So yeah, we don't use that anymore. What we do is we buy mixed compost, so it's normally mixed farmyard manure we buy in. Occasionally during the build we will put some mushroom compost through that as well, because it works as a better soil conditioner. It's basically got very kind of low nutrient value, and it's just sort of loads of organic matter to sort of fluff your soil up a little bit more, and then the farmyard manure will add the nutrients that that the vegetables need to grow, really.
Okay. Are they right? Should you not use chicken manure, or is that actually an awesome feed and it's nonsense?
Probably no comment on that one, I'd say. Like, I don't want to get in trouble with the EHO.
Well done. Yeah, there are buddies, the good old EHO and the planners. I can get really geeky and go into a lot of detail and stuff. And then there's a my son was laughing at me this morning because there's an actual hour and a half documentary on Netflix at the moment purely about soil. And I was like, there you go. People go, with my podcast, I can be an hour on something. And we've just...
Woody Harrelson one, I think.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Have you seen it?
No, it's on my watch list. My partner and the kids are going away for the weekend. So
there's a treat for you.
Yeah, I mean, that is how nerdy I am.
Nice.
Sit down and watch a documentary about soil.
Icy cold beer. And I'm with you. Next time.
All my mates will be trying to drag me down to the pub, but I'm going to watch a bit of Woody.
It is, and like the potential of soil to capture all the carbon in the environment. I could bang on about that, but I won't. So who leads this dance then? Because you're very much working in partnership with the chefs. In general, is it that Ollie reads something, gets excited about something and goes, oh my God, I want to grow this, that's going to be awesome, and then you do? Or is it very much chefs kind of read a recipe or got inspired or got an idea and goes, oh my God, Ollie, this is going to be epic, can you grow it? And then you go, no, mangoes don't grow well in Dorset, I don't know, but who leads it?
I think there's a little bit of both, but generally our chefs are probably a little bit too busy to be flicking through vegetable magazines and find the next big thing. So I think in terms of selection of varieties, they might give us an idea of what they want, and then we will choose a specific variety for specific purposes. I mean, an example there might be they might say, you know what, we want we only grow flat leaf parsley, but actually we'd like some curly parsley this year, or we'd like a Savoyed cabbage. What can you do for that? And then with that small amount of information, we'll then work out what's going to grow best at that time of year in that little window we've got left on the jigsaw of the sowing plan, as I was talking about earlier. Yeah. We'll take it from that point.
Does what grow in different? You mentioned like the different soil, for example, between Bath and Pig on the Beach. Is it also down to, I don't know, I suppose, is there a lot of difference between what you can grow in one pig to the other, or actually, is it pretty easy to put most stuff in at all of the venues?
There's quite a lot of variance. So the pig at Harlem Bay, we say, they're very exposed there. You've got a lot of sort of very salty, strong winds coming across the headland. So you might as well not bother growing sort of summer beans, French or runner beans. Whereas broad beans are kind of okay because they're a little bit hardier, and maybe some dwarf French beans that only get to about a foot tall. They're not too bad. But then you'll get other things there, like the brassicas will be really, they grow amazingly in that sort of salty environment. Whereas other hotels, you might struggle even within the same garden. You might struggle to grow carrots. The pig at Bridge Place, we haven't worked out why, but half the garden produces lovely carrots, the other half they don't germinate.
Really,
and,
it's bonkers,
we haven't
isn't it?
quite worked that out yet.
Yeah.
It's playing around with varieties over the years. We'll hopefully nail exactly how to do it. But it's the problem-solving element is the fun part of the game, really.
Yeah, and then I suppose because it must be difficult. Chefs are sort of reliant on you. They're planning their menus. They're getting excited about coming into certain seasons. You're renowned for that, sort of seed to plate concept, I suppose. But if you do get decimated by weather or something doesn't germinate, fundamentally you haven't got the produce. I guess you've got a supply chain, have you, that will in essence step in if necessary. Have you ever lost, I suppose, a big sort of key crop because of some sort of disaster, and then is it just a case of going to the shop?
Yeah, we've had things wiped out before. We might have a soil-borne pest that's knackered a load of I don't know. Just pick an example, something like a cabbage white butterfly on the brassicas we were discussing earlier. If you don't manage that properly, they'll decimate your beds in minutes, pretty much. It feels like in minutes. I suppose it's just about managing that. It's just about knowing what to do. But a big thing that we never lie about the fact we're not self-sufficient. We need to supplement what we can grow. from local suppliers. So even if we can only get 10-20% from our kitchen garden of a certain crop, the rest of something very similar, if not exactly the same, will be grown by a local farmer and served in the restaurant. Some crops we can be a bit more self-sufficient with. During the summer, if we've got a polytunnel that is 30 by 14 feet, that was at 5 by 10 metres, you probably fit just under 200 tomato plants in there. Between the end of June and the beginning of September, you probably get about 5 kilos a day from there fairly consistently. So that goes a long way towards sort of all those tomato salads you're serving, or garnishing a flatbread.
Yeah, nothing better than fresh tomatoes and a bit of basil that you've picked from your garden, apparently, because my tomatoes are all green, Ollie. Have I missed it now? Basically, I think I got planted them a bit late, so I've got a garden. I must have, a dozen tomato plants, all got loads of green tomatoes on them, not gone red. Will they go red, or am I too late, bearing in mind it's nearly October?
I think at this point, you're probably going to be eating a lot of green tomato chutney.
Right. And is that just, would it literally be a time thing? Would it be that they got planted too late? Is that the most likely?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the variety and how the plant's been managed.
The tomatoes.
So the variety of tomato. So you get sort of tomatoes, as an example, you get two types. You get the bush varieties, which as the name suggests, kind of grow as a bush with lots of stems, or you get the cordon varieties, which grows more like a vine, and that requires a little bit more management. But I like growing those ones. You can fit, more of them into a small space. The actual management of it's quite fun. It's nice, nice little pruning exercise.
I've got some of both, and I've got some inside and some outside. They're all still green.
It could be location. It could be they were sown a bit late.
It started to feel like Gardener's World, where somebody just gets in touch and says, "Ollie, I've got this problem."
Ping me an email next year if you want any little bits.
Well, you just ping me an email when I should be planting my tomatoes. Well, I don't need to worry anymore because you're just going to drop them off on the way past. So, is there anything particular that you grow, like a favourite thing? I suppose that you found where you go, man, I love those.
Yeah, it changes at different times of the year and at different times in my life, I suppose. I've always been fascinated by chilies and peppers, and there's some really interesting varieties of them. I work closely with a company called Seaspring Seeds, who I believe you've featured in one of your
on the podcast.
Earlier podcasts.
Fascinating. Yeah, Joy Michael.
And I mean, they literally, what they don't know about chili or Solanaceae production. They're just as good with tomatoes. The Solanaceae family is that.
I've not heard that word. Solanaceae.
Solanaceae. It's tomatoes, aubergines, chilies and peppers, deadly nightshade. We don't grow much of that, but right. Solanaceae has always fascinated me. Chilies and sweet peppers, and also the growing of tomatoes, as I said. This time of year, or at least in a month or two's time, I love having planted out the garlic and just seeing them come up, and the first little shoots coming out like neat little rows of soldiers. They look fantastic on a slightly frosted ground in early December. It's it's really nice. I've got a big passion for different squashes, winter squashes, and I mentioned earlier my love of certain gardening journalists. There's a absolute hero of mine called James Wong, and he's written some fascinating stuff about how you can increase the flavour and the texture of the squashes by just curing them for different times and understanding the species of the squash that you're growing. Whereas most vegetables you grow just one species. There's 3 winter squash species you might be likely to grow. And there's so much information on there. He also talks about why you shouldn't grow butternut squash because they're the crappiest squash, basically.
Really? Yeah. Fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. That's what the supermarkets do, I suppose.
Well, there's a reason they do it. It's because they're very easy to process, very easy to prep. I'm plagiarising James Wong here. So,
don't worry.
But the sort of the cavity where the seeds grow in the middle of the squash is quite small on a butternut.
Right.
So you get a lot more kind of flesh to seed ratio there.
Yeah.
And you can get great big chunks. They're quick to process into ready meals. And they weigh a lot, so you can sell them for a bit more.
Yeah.
Don't
Okay.
grow,
Well,
don't grow
that's
butternuts.
yeah, that's a nice little segue, I suppose, into the wonderful world of farming. But let's start with your thoughts around organic and non-organic. I suppose. What's your thoughts around that?
We manage our gardens organically. We're not organically certified. So, and actually, what I normally say is we're as organic as possible. Again, we're in small spaces, and we have to remember that we're a show garden as well as a productive space. Like every minute of every day, we have to keep that in our minds. So if we ever had a real emergency, we would probably, have to use something nastier on it. But in 9 years, we haven't had to do that. So
That's good.
we've got that ace up our sleeves, but we will fight tooth and nail to do everything else possible before we get to that stage.
Okay.
Organic is definitely it's definitely the way to go. And as I said, I've got a love of ecology. I want to create ecosystems and everything. And I try and, whenever I design a garden, I leave habitat for beneficial insects, or if I know that historically there's been a slow worm community or a hedgehog community there, I'll make sure that there's habitat for them left so they can continue to be in there. And again, I'm sounding lazy, but they do the hard work for me. They'll predate on the insects. Slow worms and hedgehogs love eating slugs, and I used to go around every morning with an ice cream tub, knowing where all the slugs hide, going pick them off all the all the lower leaves of the strawberries and everything, and every day chucking them to the chickens. The chickens got bored of eating slugs very quickly.
Right. It's what to do with them then. I keep finding slugs in my garden, and I won't say that I lob them over the wall into my neighbour, because that would be terrible. But yeah, what do you do with them all? Give them to a chef, I suppose.
No, I've got a sort of really nasty sort of old pair of secateurs that have one sole purpose.
Okay, but generally it seems to be if you get the whole ecosystem right, like you were saying, you need hedgehogs eat the snails or whatever, and birds and ladybirds arrive and eat the aphids and all that kind of stuff. So you need this kind of complete. But my garden has just been completely and utterly decimated by what I think is the white butterflies. I mean, I just see dozens of them out there. I've never seen them in my garden before. I planted some kale and various other bits, some Romanesco. I love Romanesco cauliflowers. Planted loads of those. I was super excited, and they've all just been utterly decimated. So what can you do about that? As I've gone back to my gardener's world, ask Ollie's column. This will be a regular feature that we'll be doing on a weekly basis. But just as an example, what do you do about stuff like that? Because if they rock up, they can completely decimate your crop in no time, can't they?
So there's two main pests of your brassicas. Like there's the birds and the butterflies.
Right.
So I'll just quickly deal with the birds and then I'll go into the butterflies. So when you plant them out, net them, stick a net over the top of them, and that will go some way to deterring the birds, and also some way to deterring the butterflies as well, depending on the size of the mesh of your net. Obviously, the finer the mesh, the less likely a butterfly will be able to squeeze through it. But what we really use on the caterpillars is we've got an organic insecticide that we spray on them onto the brassicas. We treat them with this multiple times throughout the summer, and it's basically a bacteria that you're spraying onto the brassicas, which will, I believe, make the caterpillars unable to reproduce.
Okay.
That's how you break the life cycle.
Right.
With any pest, you're just breaking the life cycle. Insects will have egg stage, larval stage, and a sort of a final stage, an imago, I think it's called. And you have to kind of break that life cycle as they're going, in order to stop those pests being in your garden. Because otherwise you'll kill off all the adults. They'll have already laid eggs. You'll think, oh great, nailed them. Don't need to do anything else all summer. And a week later, all those eggs hatch, and you've got 50,000 caterpillars all over your brassica beds.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I went out once and I found this plant, and it was actually on a table on the garden. I thought, my God, that plant's moving. And I went over there. It must have had 30 or 40 caterpillars. It was just gone in one day. It was just completely eaten.
And I love I love nature as well. So I found a particularly cool caterpillar that I couldn't identify. It's probably a moth caterpillar on one of my Chilean guava plants the other day. I'll show you a picture later. But it looked like it had like a cool Mohican. To coin another 90s reference, he had the look of Rufio from Hook with like the red spiky hair.
Yeah, no, hats off to them. What they managed to put, and how how all these butterflies that I've never seen in my garden before, like how do they know? They just rock up from nowhere in their dozens, and you just think that's amazing, isn't it? That how nature works. There'll
always be someone in the next field or next house, growing a few cabbages and. Yeah,
I suppose that's what it is.
And if they've got two choices, go and find food or die.
Yeah, you're pretty motivated.
You'd probably go and look for the food, wouldn't you?
Yeah, probably. Not in my garden. it's all gone. Do you grow some of the stuff then? So predominantly kitchen gardens, it's about chefs, it's about cooking, back leaving the bug world. Do you grow some stuff just because it looks aesthetic in the garden and you just go, look, it just looks bloody awesome? Or does everything fundamentally have to be edible?
As long as it's edible or medicinal. Yeah, I think you can get away with growing some things which, you probably wouldn't want to eat a lot of, but they're a real wow factor. And I think those sort of wow factor vegetables, alongside any sort of experimental vegetables that you don't know if they're, going to produce well or even taste any good or anything, newer varieties, we can allow up to about 10-20%. Of our gardens to go to things like that because it's interesting. It's interesting for the guests, the journalists, everyone really. So it starts conversation.
Yeah. No, I think it's So certainly, I say it's that picture perfect, almost postcard kind of visuals that I remember from the Pig on the Beach, for example.
But the chili peppers. We're not a restaurant that sells like loads of spicy food. We're going back to the self-sufficiency thing. We're probably self-sufficient with chilies, and the chefs, they're wizards with what they do with them. They will preserve. They will smoke them. They'll pickle them. They'll dry them. Do everything with them to preserve them for the winter months. We've even made great long strings of alternating, different coloured chilies to hang on our Christmas tree and the pigs. Before just to mix things up a bit, and they pigify the sort of norm, I suppose.
Yeah, it's handy, isn't it, if you've got chefs in your arsenal of stuff? Cause, it must be. I don't know if you were just working on a farm and all the stuff sort of disappears off into the world and you don't get to see it. But I think it's great if you actually get to see just how much they can do with stuff. Nothing needs to go to waste, really, is it?
Well, also, the preserving has become a very big thing over the last few years. We've definitely. I think really it's the ebbs and flows of staff and their interests. We just happen to have a load of head chefs at the moment who are really interested in preserving techniques and using different techniques from around the world. So you might get one chef who wants to make different kimchis, whereas another chef, one of our head chefs is a Polish guy who's worked for us since day one, and he can pickle anything. It's amazing.
I've had some Polish chefs, and I don't know what they do to their soup, but I've just been like, how is that soup so good? And it just comes deep rooted in their culture.
My partner Jo is Polish, and she makes some amazing
incredible,
soups.
Isn't it? Yeah, I'm like, I've never had a beatroot that tastes like that, but they put it through some sort of soup, and you go, oh my god.
I think an important thing about preservation as well, especially of what we do with organic and locally sourced, it allows you to serve homegrown produce throughout the months of the year where the garden is not as productive, over the winter months. We do harvest every day, but obviously the harvesting levels drop during the winter. Being able to look a guest in the eye and say, like, this is homegrown produce, even though you're under 6 inches of snow outside. It's just
I'm going to live on green tomato chutney for the rest of the year by the sounds of it, Ollie, so I'll be getting the hang of that. And there must be some stuff there's no possible way you can use. So in Bath you've got an orchard, is that right? And presumably you could therefore be self-sufficient in apples. Does that end up going off to make cider? Or
so we've got some orchard space in most of our properties, actually, but Bath's probably the most interesting one because it was it was quite a redundant orchard. It had been sort of left a little bit by our predecessors there. So it took us about 3 to 5 years to really get it back into shape. So it was, again, fun little nerdy project. If you're into those sort of things, probably pretty tedious if you're not. We've used apples for a number of things. Yeah, be it cider making, be it making just a real load of apple sauce, being a pig, people.
Yeah, true.
People
they go quite well together.
A few pork chops over the year.
Yeah.
Apple juice we've made in the past. So yeah, really, again, it depends what the chef is inspired by that year, or I suppose sometimes if the bar get their hands on it first, because we're also a supplier to the bar for infusions and cocktails.
Yeah. Do you run any courses in gardening? Do you teach this great level of knowledge to the public asking for a friend?
Oh, we don't teach. I don't know if I'm the right level to teach people. To be honest, largely self-taught. With a few sort of formal qualifications behind me, but I don't think at a teaching level.
Okay, because does the pig run cookery courses and stuff like that as well, though? Or
Limewood does.
Right.
I don't think we've done any at the pig, but it's not out of the question
never
for the future. I think hospitality in general will have to find ways to diversify at the moment.
Looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Pivoting. So whatever's going to sort of keep people coming in through the doors or keep generating income, I suppose.
Yeah. Talking of which, just very briefly, so in that lockdown period, so we're I was going to say out the other side of it, but hurtling towards another one, if you believe all the rumour mills.
Podcast COVID
question. I haven't touched on it much recently, which is good, and we're only going to touch on it very, very briefly. But produce keeps growing, doesn't it? So what did you do? Did your team actually, the kitchen gardening team, did they stay employed through lockdown? And what on earth did you do with all of that produce?
So the vast majority of our staff were furloughed, obviously, during the lockdown period. We kept one kitchen gardener, and generally the head kitchen gardener per property, just to keep the gardens kind of ticking over the lockdown. But no, in general, they were allowed to just run a sort of quite skeleton staff, sort of sleepy state. So we cleared a lot of stuff out. We used what we could. We gave a lot of stuff to people providing for elderly or people who were shielding at the time. So nothing was wasted throughout that period. But then we'd either put in crops that were kind of quite low maintenance and would be ready for. At the time, it was indefinite, wasn't it? At such a time when we could reopen and have guests through the door again. In other beds, we might have just dug a load of manure into the soil and covered it over with a bit of weed control fabric, just so it's basically a zero maintenance bed for that period. And once you take that fabric off in X amount of months or weeks' time, it's good to go, and you can just plant straight into it.
I'm just imagining then what happened on the day that you got told, right, we're reopening on the 4th of July. Did all hell break loose? Because you were like, shit, we've got to make all these gardens look epic in 3 weeks. We haven't had a lot of notice in any of this as to what's going on, I suppose, have we?
So I think we didn't open immediately when basically pubs were allowed to go back and pubs and restaurants. So it gave me a few weeks to kind of plan what we were going to do. So you referred earlier to a tweet I did about 33,000 seedlings produced. And that was basically our lockdown sowings. That was the day that, we came back, we had a team of about 5 of us, here where we are, where we're sitting at the moment. And we nailed a lot of trays of seedlings that week. Week of 22nd of June, 2020 will stay in my memory for quite a long time, I think.
Going down in history, just an epic amount of work. So just touch on the future a little bit, I suppose. You must want to continually evolve and continually develop. I know you've just done a vineyard, is that right? What was the motivation for a vineyard? That feels like a really silly question because presumably it was wine, but what triggered that?
Being in the South Downs and right in the middle of where everyone's everyone's producing wines in the UK at the moment, and I don't need to tell you too much about the champagne houses buying up land, and the vein of chalk and flint that runs through the South Downs is geologically speaking the same one that runs through the Champagne region, so you've got a similar sort of terroir. We've planted the vineyard. It's largely I think a labour of love from my old man. Obviously he's quite a fan of wines, and has been known for it over the years. He's having run hosted the van with Gerard, who was the Don, wasn't he? He was the legend.
Yeah,
wine,
the world's finest sommelier.
God rest his soul, obviously, all that. But for us, it's a steep learning curve. We're not viticulturalists by trade. The skills are transferable, but it is a new one on myself and my colleague Alex Coates, who's going to be the head kitchen gardener down at Madehurst. We're basically learning from scratch, really, how to run a vineyard.
Yeah, that's cool, isn't it? I love that.
We've got the obvious mix of grapes there. We've got a Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. No sort of surprises. What some of our end goals might be from those vines. I think we're going to try making some still wine as well.
Wow.
Just it's mix it up a little bit. From there's a lot of British sparkling wines, and I'm sure that they make it far better than we will ever be making it. We've worked closely over the years with a number of them, to single out a couple, but not exclusive to Hambledon. We've worked closely with Night Timber. We used to have as our house sparkling, and more recently vineyards like Simpson's down in Kent. I think the Pigott Bridge Place has really brought a lot of those Kentish vineyards into the fold with us as well.
Amazing. Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? I love it. I love the fact that, I don't know, it's just kind of winding up any opportunity to wind up the French is good fun, I think, isn't it? We've always been neighbours with them for so many generations. I think it's exciting when we win some blind tasting awards in sparkling wines, which is exciting.
Obviously everyone loves the story of the Judgment of Paris and everything. That's probably the first time that they had two wine fingers stuck up at them.
No, it's superb. I just it's exciting. So what else then, for the actual gardens themselves, do you feel that they're always kind of evolving and that you're learning and that you've got this kind of growth trajectory, I suppose? That's a pun, isn't it? A growth trajectory in a kitchen garden, but you know what I mean?
I think you're constantly evolving your knowledge. Like nobody knows everything, and anyone who does is just a liar, really, and I probably don't want to employ them.
My son, he knows everything, apparently, so he tells me. He's only 13, but yeah.
But I think it's all about passing knowledge down through the generations. I often say the Victorians are the masters of kitchen gardening, and sadly a lot of their skills got lost during the wars. Obviously, those sort of landscape workers would have been some of the first people in the trenches, I would have thought. And also nowadays, you probably get a few of the old boys who, are a little bit hesitant to pass on their knowledge to some of the younger generation because, maybe they're a little bit worried about people taking their jobs or anything. But you always have to learn, and it's really important to pass that knowledge to people. So, I take my own kids down to our allotment, and with my son, from the age of 1.5, he's been pulling up carrots and eating them straight out of the soil. A bit of a garnish of manure on it.
Yeah, perfect. That's where you get all your the germs and stuff that we actually need, isn't it? That's let's not even go there in a post-COVID world. Everything's been sanitized within an inch of its life. We'll all be dying of random stuff. I wish I'd managed to get my kids as interested. I did manage to get them I grew some sweet corn in the garden. That went pretty well. I did manage to get them eating that. But in general, they're not really showing a huge amount of interest in coming out in the garden and digging up a beetroot and a carrot yet.
I'll email you a few varieties that will inspire them.
Okay, something that tastes like chocolate brownie would be perfect.
I've got a few things that taste like sweets. When we had a wander around earlier, we stopped by, for instance, lemon verbena, which that has a strong scent of the sherbet lemon sweet. You know, when you're a kid. Yeah. We've got we didn't look at it, but I can show you afterwards. A chocolate peppermint we grow, which again the scent to me is after eights. Yeah. You know, we've got a pineapple sage salvia plant that you know, has a sort of pineapple chunk scent to it. So I've often thought it'd be fun to do a sort of show garden based on an old-fashioned sweet shop.
Yeah,
it'd be
kiddie sweet shop. I think you'd have to blindfold the kids to get them in there. But yeah, just give them a little bit of each of those, and they'd probably be able to name the sweets, which I suppose makes sense.
There's a variety of sweet pepper that Sea Spring Seeds sell called Hammock. And they sort of you know, lovingly call it a lunchbox pepper, but they grow these sort of baby sweet peppers, so they're probably about 3 or 4 inches in length. They're bright orange, so really visual. They produce heavily throughout the year. I've got a plant outside that I think, I mean, generally you're growing them in polytunnels to really produce, but I've probably got about 1 kilo of them over the summer, just from a pot in the garden, which I thought was fairly impressive for that environment. You know, they're sweet and crunchy as anything, and they've got very few seeds in them. So they're a lunchbox pepper because the kids love them and they fit in a lunchbox easily.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm learning by the second. So I suppose ultimate Ollie dream. Your dad has a reputation for kind of you know, and openly admits that he never wants to run a massive business. So the pig inevitably will get to the sort of, you know, some sort of size where we'll go, don't really want to do that anymore. Do you have a post kind of pig dream, I suppose, about, you know, what's Ollie doing in 10, 20 years or whatever that might be? Do you think you'll stay in farming and garden produce, or go back to your eco roots and get a computer in a basement?
No, I think I've got a few ideas for afterwards. And I, you know, at the moment, you know, there's no time scale on it really. You know, I've got the milestone of 10 years of the company next year, which is exciting. So so no plans to leave anytime soon. But I think, you know, having a passion for you know, fruit and vegetable production, but also you know, having grown up my whole life in hospitality, you know, I think, you know, somewhere in that bracket, I've got a few little ideas that I could use. But I think with any business, starting any small business, I think you have to have several kind of revenue streams. So there will probably be a few little things that I do under one kind of umbrella.
Excellent. That was a really good answer without you getting shot by either your dad, wasn't it, for handing notes on here, or giving away any ridiculously amazing ideas that people can nick. Politics. Well, look.
Or catching myself out in the future when I don't do
when
any
you
of
listen
them.
back and go, shit. Yeah.
Or I execute them poorly.
Yeah, true. Just thank you for sparing the time. You've been very generous in showing me round, and just, thanks for making those kitchen gardens awesome and inspiring me to grow some fundamentally very wholly sort of, you know, lettuce leaves or kale leaves in my garden from walking around your amazing gardens. And congratulations for what you kind of helped pull off, because they really are phenomenal sort of inspirational spaces that really good, and they taste awesome as well.
Thanks. You know, it's the credit should go to the teams in the individual kitchen gardens. You know, like I might steer the ship, but you know, they're the guys who, you know, put in the real sort of elbow grease of making those gardens look great day to day. Yeah,
and I'm just excited that, you know, people care enough and make the effort, because as we discussed before we started chatting, you know, these things don't always make the most financial sense. You know, they're not P&L driven. They're driven by a love of great produce and learning and quirky kind of eccentricity. And for me, what genuine hospitality business, you know, is about, if that's not a contradiction, is this doing it because you love it and just because it's fun, and not everything we do has to be driven by sort of, you know, net profit basically. So thanks for sticking 2 fingers up to the big guys who buy everything and have it flown across the world, and being cheap, because you probably sometimes grow a vegetable that's probably cost £100 to grow and you could buy it for threepence.
Maybe not quite that extreme, but I take your point definitely.
Awesome. All right, thank you. And well, where should people go, by the way, if they want to follow your adventures? Are you on any kind of social channel yourself? Or?
I'm probably most on Twitter. I'm an awful social media user, to be honest. But I'm at Ollie Hutson 85 on Twitter. I do have an Instagram that is very rarely used. I'm more of a lurker, and I believe that it might be Ollie Hutson 85 as well. That one.
Amazing.
Thank you very much for having me on Humans in Hospitality. It's been a pleasure.
No worries at all. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Go well.
So there you have it. What an utter gentleman Ollie Hutson is, and I really hope you enjoyed our conversation. You probably learned a lot more about kitchen gardens and white butterflies and brassicas than you ever thought you wanted to know. But I hope you enjoyed the chat, and please go over to the website humansofhospitality.co.uk, where you will find the links through to Ollie's social media channels. And whilst you're there, why not sign up? There's a little form on the website. Pop your email address and your name in there. I don't share it with anybody, but it does mean that every Monday I will ping you a little email, and it just lets you know who this week's guest is, gives you a little bit of blurb, and links you through to their social and their details, so you can decide if you want to listen to that week's episode. Okay, thanks so much for joining me. I will be back next Monday with another conversation. Cheers.